My world was defined by two things: the cold bite of iron around my neck and the symphony of scents I was never supposed to perceive. They call me Elara, the silent omega of the Frostfang pack, a ghost in the cellar, a stain on their pride. They think my muteness is a defect, a sign of a broken wolf. They are wrong. I am silent because if I ever spoke, the truths I would utter would shake our territory to its very roots. I can smell everything. Not just the pine resin on the hunter's boots or the fierce sweat on a disobedient pup. I can smell emotions. Rage is a sharp, coppery burn. Deceit is a cloying, rotten sweet fruit. And grief is the scent of rain on barren earth, hollow and cold. Tonight the cellar air was thick with the greasy smoke of hatred. It poured down the stone steps before the heavy trapdoor even slammed open. Beta Torvin's hulking form blotted out the weak moonlight. His scent was a volcanic mix of fury and smug satisfaction, a nauseating combination. Up defect. His boot connected with the stone floor beside my pallet of straw. The Alpha's son has commanded a gathering. Even the chained ones must bear witness to his glory. The chain attached to my iron collar clanked as I slowly rose. I did not look at him. Looking invited more cruelty. I focused on the sense. Under Torvin's brutality, I caught a thin, silver thread of anxiety. Something had the beta on edge. That was new. That was interesting. He yanked the chain, and I stumbled up the slick steps, emerging into the clearing at the heart of the Frostfang territory. The entire pack was assembled, their faces turned toward the great wooden dais. Alpha Ronan, a bear of a man whose scent was always of old blood and damp fur, stood with his son, Cedric. Cedric's scent was the worst. It was a calculated perfume of ambition and rot, like flowers stuffed into a coffin. He was to be officially named heir tonight. His gaze swept over the lower-ranking wolves and settled on me, chained to a post at the very edge of the firelight. A cruel smile touched his lips. I was his favorite prop, a living symbol of the weakness he promised to eradicate. The ceremony began. Chants, the thumping of spears, the howling of oaths. I let the waves of sound wash over me, instead opening my senses to the emotional tapestry of the pack. I wove through threads of genuine loyalty, thick cords of fear, and the sly, slippery scents of those already plotting for Cedric's favor. Then a new scent arrived. It didn't creep in, it announced itself on the wind, cutting through the smoke and sweat like a clarion call. It was the clean, terrifying scent of a lightning strike in a deep forest, ozone, shattered granite, and ancient, powerful cedar. My head snapped up, my heart hammering against my ribs. No one else seemed to notice. Their senses were dull, oblivious. A moment later, the sentinel wolves at the tree line melted back into the clearing, their postures rigid with shock, and he walked in. He moved with an effortless authority that made Alpha Ronan look like a posturing child. He was taller, broader, his presence compressing the space around him. His eyes, even from this distance, gleamed like molten gold in the firelight. His scent was power, pure, untamed, and devastatingly calm. This was no visiting Alpha. This was something else entirely. Whispers erupted, then died as he reached the dais. Alpha Ronan bowed so low his forehead nearly touched the planks. "Alpha King Kaelen," he stuttered, his voice trembling, we are unworthy of this honor." Alpha King, the title echoed in the silent space of my mind. The sovereign ruler of all the territories, a figure from stories, he was here. King Kaelen's voice when he spoke was low but carried to every ear. "I am touring the border packs. Continue your rituals." But he wasn't watching Cedric. His gaze, those golden eyes, was slowly scanning the crowd. They passed over the warriors, the elders, the proud, and then they stopped. On me, time froze, the greasy hatred of the pack, Cedric's rot, even the biting cold, all of it fell away. There was only that gaze and that scent, and in that moment I did something inexplicable, something that would shatter my world. I met his eyes. A jolt like a live wire passed through me. His scent shifted just a fraction. The lightning strike ozone flared, and underneath it I caught a new note, one of profound, earth-shattering recognition. It wasn't the recognition of a pitiful Omega in chains. It was the scent of a puzzle solved, a lost chord found. Cedric, noticing the king's distraction, stepped forward, his voice oily with deference. "My king, pay no mind to the defect. A mute Omega, too weak to hold a wolf form. We keep her chained for her own protection and for the purity of the pack." King Kaelen finally looked away from me, turning his head towards Cedric with a slowness that was more threatening than any snarl. The air grew heavier. "You keep one of your own in iron," the king said, his tone deceptively soft. "You present your heir while you shackle your legacy." He took a step down from the dais, and the crowd parted like wheat before a scythe. He walked directly toward my post. My knees felt weak. The crushing weight of his power should have driven me to the ground, but that thread of recognition in his scent held me upright. He stopped a mere arm's length away. Up close he was immense. The power radiating from him was a tangible heat. He looked at the thick iron collar around my neck, then at the heavy chain in Beta Torvin's white-knuckled grip. His expression was unreadable, but his scent bloomed with a cold, deadly fury that made the surrounding wolves whimper and step back. "The law of the sovereign pack," King Kaelen said, his voice now ringing with absolute authority, "decrees that no wolf shall be bound in cold iron except for the crime of treason against the crown itself." He looked from Torvin to Alpha Ronan. What treason has this Omega committed? The deafening silence answered him. Alpha Ronan paled. Cedric's rotten sweet scent spiked with panic. The king's eyes returned to mine. In them I saw not pity but a question, a silent demand, "Show me." And so, breaking a lifetime of self-preservation, I let my guard down. I didn't just look at him, I reached for him with the only sense that had ever served me. I poured every ounce of the truth I had gathered, the sense of Ronan's hidden cruelty, Cedric's poisoned ambitions, Torvin's willing brutality, the pack's festering fear, into my gaze. I showed him the story written in the air, the story only I could read. His golden eyes widened a fraction. He understood, he smelled it. Then King Kaelen, the most powerful being in our world, did the unthinkable. He reached out. His fingers, careful and impossibly warm, brushed against the cold iron of my collar. A spark, real or imagined, flashed where his skin met the metal. "The law is broken here," he declared, his voice leaving no room for argument. "By this chain and by the lies that forged it." With a sharp twist of his wrist, there was a deafening crack. The lock on my collar shattered into pieces. The heavy iron band fell from my neck and struck the frozen earth with a thud that seemed to echo forever. The gasp from the pack was a unified sound of shock. I stood there free, the ghostly impression of the collar still cold on my skin, breathing in the storm scent of the king who had broken the world's law for a silent Omega he had never met. And I knew with a terrifying certainty that nothing would ever be the same again. The silence that followed the thud of my collar was the most profound sound I had ever heard. It wasn't an absence of noise, but a pressure, a held breath from 50 wolves who had just witnessed a fundamental law of their world being rewritten. The cold night air rushed against the skin of my neck, a sensation so alien it felt like a burn. I lifted a trembling hand, my fingertips brushing the tender, bruised skin where the iron had rested for years. Free. The word was a silent scream in the cavern of my mind. My eyes were locked on Alpha King Kaelen's face. His expression remained an impenetrable mask of sovereign calm, but his scent told the true story. The initial lightning strike fury had banked into a deep, smoldering ember of anger, but layered over it now was something clear and purposeful, like the scent of a decision finally made. He saw my hand at my throat, saw the shock in my eyes, and gave the barest, almost imperceptible nod. It wasn't a nod of reassurance, it was an acknowledgement. "I see you, and this is just the beginning." The spell was shattered by Alpha Ronan's spluttering protest. "My king." This is highly irregular. The Omega, she is unstable, a danger to herself and the pack order. His scent was a swamp of terror and flailing desperation. The old blood and damp fur smell now rank with the sourness of exposed fear. King Kaelen turned his head just slightly. The movement was lethally slow. The only danger I perceive, Alpha Ronin, is a leader so blind he mistakes a treasure for trash, and so weak he binds it in fear. His voice was a soft rumble that carried absolute authority. You presented an heir tonight. His gaze flicked to Cedric, who had gone as pale as bone. But a pack that chains its true hearts has no future, only a slow decay. I can smell the rot from here. Cedric took a step forward, his attempt at a respectful bow twisted by his panic. Your Majesty, if I may explain her muteness, it is a sign of a fractured spirit. She has no wolf, she cannot communicate, she is less than silence. The single word from the king did not rise in volume, but it held a finality that cracked through the air like a whip. Cedric flinched as if struck. You speak of what she lacks, I am interested in what she is. He turned his full attention back to me. The weight of it was immense, a physical pressure. You are Elara. It wasn't a question, he knew my name. How? I could only stare, my breath coming in short, shallow pants. The urge to look down, to revert to the invisible creature I had been, was a powerful instinct. But the memory of the shattered lock held me firm. I gave another small, shaky nod. You will come with me, he stated, his tone leaving no room for debate. It wasn't a request, nor was it the harsh command of an alpha like Ronin. It was a declaration of fact as inevitable as the sunrise. A fresh wave of shock, laced with outrage and envy, rippled through the pack. Their scents curdled around me. An Omega, the lowest, being taken by the Alpha King, it was an impossibility, it was an insult, yet no one dared to voice a single syllable. Beta Torvin, still holding the now useless length of chain, found a shred of his courage. With all respect, King Kaelen, where? She is Frostfang, her place is here. For the first time, a trace of emotion touched the king's mouth, not a smile, but a faint, cold curve of contempt. Her place, he said, is where her worth is recognized. And it seems that is no longer within the borders of Frostfang. She is under my protection now. That is the new law, protection. The word echoed strangely in my silent world. I had never been protected. I had been tolerated, used, and shackled. The concept was as foreign as his scent. He didn't wait for further argument. He simply turned and began to walk towards the tree line where his own guards, two massive warriors whose scents were of stone and steel, stood waiting. He expected me to follow. It was a test. My legs felt like water. The eyes of the pack were branded on my skin, Ronin's fury, Cedric's venomous hatred, Torvin's confusion, the bewildered stares of the others. This clearing, this prison, was all I had ever known. To walk away was to step into a void. But the alternative was to stay. To stay meant the collar would return and the hatred would now be poisoned with a new, potent dose of humiliation because of my momentary freedom. Staying was a death sentence. I took a step. The frozen grass crunched under my bare foot. The sound was deafening. I took another, and then another. I did not look back. I focused on the broad, retreating back of the Alpha King, on the storm and cedar scent that was now a trail for me to follow. I walked past the stunned faces, through the wall of their resentment, and out of the circle of firelight. The moment the shadows of the ancient pines enveloped me, a strange sensation bloomed in my chest. It wasn't warmth, not yet. It was the absence of a weight I had carried for so long I'd forgotten its presence. It was the first, faint flutter of something that might one day become courage. His guards fell into step behind me, their presence not threatening but watchful. We walked in silence for what felt like miles, until the sounds and scents of the Frostfang pack were far behind us. We reached a small, moonlit clearing where several horses and more guards waited. King Kaelen stopped beside a tall, dark stallion and finally turned to face me. In the dappled moonlight, his features seemed less stern but no less intense. "You can understand me," he said, his voice lower now, meant only for us. "You can perceive far more than anyone in that den of fools realizes. Your silence is not a weakness, Elara. It is a fortress, and I have just torn down its first wall." His words pierced through me. He truly saw. The validation was so sharp it was painful. I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly conscious of my thin, ragged dress in the freezing night. Without a word, King Kaelen unfastened the heavy cloak from his own shoulders. It was lined with thick, soft fur and carried the overwhelming essence of him. He stepped forward and draped it around me. The warmth was immediate, sinking into my frozen bones. The scent of him enveloped me completely, power, certainty, and that strange, lingering note of recognition. It was both terrifying and the safest I had ever felt. "We ride for the Silverwood Citadel," he said, mounting his horse. One of the guards brought forward a gentle, gray mare for me. "There you will be safe, and there you will begin to learn what you are." He offered no other explanation. As I was helped onto the mare, clutching the edges of the cloak tightly, I looked back once in the direction of the only home I'd ever known. I felt no pull, no nostalgia, only the chilling scent of rot left thankfully behind. As the horses began to move, the king riding ahead, a single, coherent thought finally formed in the whirlwind of my mind, clear and bright as the stars above us. He broke the law for me. But what law exactly am I bound by now? The journey to the Silverwood Citadel was a blur of cold wind, the rhythmic beat of hooves, and the all-consuming scent of the king's cloak. I buried my face in the fur, using his stormy aroma as an anchor against the sensory onslaught of the unfamiliar world. I had never been beyond the Frostfang borders. Every new mile brought a cascade of new scents, strange trees, unseen animals, the distant tang of a river, and the clean, cold scent of high mountains. King Kaelen did not speak to me during the ride. He rode at the head of our small column, a silent, brooding figure etched against the pre-dawn sky. But his guards, whom I learned were called Rydian and Gavriel, were a quiet, steady presence. They didn't treat me with the disdain I was accustomed to, nor with fearful reverence. Their sense were of professional duty and a guarded curiosity. It was neutral. It was the most respectful interaction I'd ever had. As the first rays of the sun painted the peaks in rose and gold, we crested a high pass. And there, spread in the valley below, was the Silverwood Citadel. My breath caught. Frostfang's settlement was a collection of rough lodges and a stone hall. This was a city carved from the mountain itself, towers of pale gray stone soared, their tops gleaming in the dawn light. A mighty wall, seamless and strong, encircled a bustling town of cobbled streets and timber-framed houses. Banners bearing a crest of a wolf and a crescent moon fluttered in the morning breeze. It was majestic, powerful, and utterly terrifying in its scale. This was the heart of the king's domain. We rode down through the waking town. People stopped to bow deeply as the king passed. Their scents were a complex, vibrant tapestry: pride, loyalty, warmth, industry. There was no underlying thread of fear or rot here. It was the scent of a pack that was whole. And then their attention would flicker to me, the small, shrouded figure on the mare behind him. Curiosity bloomed in the air, sharp and bright, but it wasn't malicious. It was wondering, who is she? I pulled the cloak tighter, wishing I could disappear into it. We passed through a colossal gate and into an inner courtyard. Grooms rushed forward to take the horses. King Kaelen dismounted and stood waiting as Rydian helped me down. My legs were stiff and shaky. "Rydian will take you to the Sun Tower. You will have chambers there. A handmaiden, Lyra, will attend to you. She is discreet," the king said, his golden eyes assessing my overwhelmed state. "Rest, you are safe here. No one will chain you within these walls. That is my command." He turned to go, his business with me seemingly concluded for now. A sudden, desperate panic seized me. He was the only familiar thing in this vast, terrifying place. He was the one who had shattered my chains. Without thinking, I took a half step forward, my hand lifting slightly from the cloak. He stopped, sensing the movement, and looked back. I had no voice to call out. I had only my eyes and the frantic, pleading expression I knew was on my face. Don't leave me alone here. He studied me for a long moment. The purposeful scent around him softened just a fraction with something that might have been understanding. I have duties that cannot wait, he said, his voice less formal. But this is not an abandonment, Elara. This is a sanctuary. Lyra will care for you. I will send for you this evening. It was a promise. I could smell the truth of it. I forced my hand down and nodded, trying to convey a gratitude I couldn't speak. Rydian led me through a labyrinth of soaring archways and sunlit corridors. The citadel was even more breathtaking inside. Tapestries depicting great hunts and histories lined the walls. The air smelled of polished wood, herbs, and parchment. It was the scent of knowledge and order. The Sun Tower was, as its name suggested, bathed in morning light. My chambers were not a cellar. They were a series of airy rooms with a window that looked out over the entire valley. There was a bed with soft blankets, a bathing area with steaming water already waiting, and a sitting area by a fireplace. It was more space than I'd ever had to myself. Lyra was waiting. She was a woman of perhaps 30, with kind eyes and a scent of lavender and calm water. She took one look at me, wild-haired, wide-eyed, dressed in rags under a king's cloak, and her expression softened with immediate practical compassion. There was no pity, just a gentle efficiency. "Welcome, Lady Elara," she said, her voice a quiet melody. "Let's get you warm and clean, shall we?" The next few hours were a surreal procession of kindness. A hot bath that washed away years of grime and the lingering scent of frostfang. Soft, clean clothes, a simple gown of deep blue wool that fit me. Lyra brushed and braided my long, tangled hair, her hands gentle. She asked no probing questions, for which I was desperately grateful. She simply talked softly about the citadel, the routines, the best places to see the sunset. As she worked, I practiced what I had always done. I read the sense. Lyra's lavender calm was genuine. Under it was a thread of quiet strength and a deep, unwavering loyalty to the king. There was no deception, no hidden agenda. It was so disarming it made my chest ache. Later, fed and sitting by the crackling fire, wrapped in a shawl, the reality began to sink in. I was in the Alpha King's citadel. I was unchained, clean, and cared for. The sheer improbability of it was dizzying. "Why?" The question hammered at me, his words echoed. "Begin to learn what you are." What did he think I was? I was an Omega who couldn't shift, couldn't speak, and could smell emotions. Was that so special? In Frostfang it had been a curse. Here it seemed to be a key. As the sun began to set, painting the room in orange and purple, a light knock came at the door. Lyra opened it to reveal not a guard, but a young page. "The king requests the presence of Elara in the Starfall Gallery," the boy announced. My heart leapt into my throat. The promise was being kept. Lyra gave me an encouraging smile and handed me my shawl. "Go on, my lady, just follow him." The page led me through different corridors to a part of the citadel that felt older, quieter. We entered a long, narrow gallery. One entire wall was made of a strange, dark, polished stone that was not stone at all, but a kind of glass. Beyond it, the night sky was a breathtaking swath of indigo, already dotted with the first brave stars. King Kaelen stood before the star-viewing wall, his hands clasped behind his back. He had changed from his travel clothes into simpler, but no less regal, dark trousers and a tunic. Without his cloak and armor, he seemed somehow more approachable, yet no less powerful. He heard me enter and turned. In the dim, starlit light of the gallery, his eyes seemed to glow with their own inner fire. "Elara," he said, my name sounding like a solemn note in the quiet room. "Come, look." I walked to stand beside him, leaving a careful distance between us. Together, we looked out at the vast, uncaring beauty of the cosmos. "The Silverwood seers have studied these stars for generations," he began, his voice a low rumble. "They chart destinies, read omens in their movements. But they require tools, rituals, intense focus." He paused, turning his gaze from the sky to me. I am told that the night I decided to tour the border packs, you looked at the moon from your cellar and wept for 3 hours. That your grief was so potent it made the sentinel wolf on duty above you feel a deep, unexplained sorrow. I froze. How could he know that? I had been alone, I had been silent. The sentinel reported a weight in the air, a sadness that had no source. Kaelen continued, watching my reaction. That same night my head seer woke from a vision, speaking of a silent song buried in the north, a song that could smell the truth of the world. He took a step closer, his storm cedar scent wrapped around me, intense and focused. Your silence is not an emptiness, Elara. It is the quiet necessary to hear a different kind of song, and your senses, they are not a defect, they are a profound, ancient gift. One that has not been seen in any wolf, alpha or omega, for centuries. He was naming it, giving shape to the formless strangeness of my life, a gift, not a curse. The concept was so revolutionary it left me reeling. What am I? The question screamed inside my skull, desperate to be heard. As if he heard it, he answered, I believe you are what our ancestors called a soul smeller, a wolf who perceives the essence of things, of people, of places, of truths and lies. A living compass for what is real. His expression grew grim, and Frostfang, rotting from the inside with Cedric's ambition and Ronan's negligence, was poisoning you. Shackling you was not just cruelty, it was a blindness that threatened to extinguish a light this world desperately needs. He looked back at the stars, his profile sharp and thoughtful. I broke our most sacred law to free you because a greater law was being broken, the law that demands we protect the rare and precious things that keep the balance of our world. Your legacy, Elara, is not a legacy of chains, it is a legacy of truth, and I intend to see it restored. I stood there in the Starfall Gallery, the infinite universe stretching before me, the words of the Alpha King rewriting the story of my soul. The silent song inside me, the one I had spent a lifetime trying to mute, began to hum a single, clear, terrifying note, home. This might be home. The revelation in the Starfall Gallery settled over me like a new skin, both heavier and lighter than the one before. A soul smeller. The name rang with a mythical truth that resonated in my bones. It explained the relentless barrage of sense, the unbearable weight of others' hidden emotions, the way I had always felt like a stranger listening in on a world shouting in a language only I could translate, but never speak. King Kaelen did not summon me the next day or the day after. Lyra explained in her gentle way that the king's time was not his own and that the business of the realm had been interrupted by his journey to the border. A part of me was relieved. The intensity of his presence, the gravity of his words, was overwhelming. I needed time to breathe, to process the impossible shift from chained Omega to whatever I was becoming in this citadel. I used the time to explore my new world, always with Lyra as my quiet shadow. I learned the rhythms of the sun tower, the way the light moved across my floor. I tasted foods I had never imagined, sweet fruits, delicate pastries, spiced meats. Each had its own emotional scent, the joy of the baker, the patience of the cook. It was a symphony where before there had only been the discordant noise of Frostfang's malice, but I was not invisible here. The curiosity of the citadel was a constant, gentle pressure. Servants would bow as I passed, their sense a mix of respect and vibrant curiosity. Warriors in the training yards would pause, their sense sharpening with assessment and a hint of protective instinct when they saw the king's cloak, which I wore often for its comforting scent. I was an anomaly, a puzzle, and in a court, puzzles attract attention. On the third day, the scent reached me first. It was a cloying, floral perfume, layered over a core of vinegar-sharp ambition. It preceded its owner down the hallway as Lyra and I returned from the gardens. A woman swept around the corner. She was stunning, with hair like spun gold and eyes of a piercing blue. Her gown was of the finest silk, and she moved with a predatory grace that set my instincts on edge. Her scent declared her status as clearly as a banner: alpha, high-ranking, dangerous. "Ah," she said, her voice a melodious chime that didn't match the vinegar beneath. "You must be the little Omega from the hinterlands, the one causing such a stir." She stopped, blocking our path, her gaze sweeping over me with dismissive precision. "I am Lady Seraphine of the Howling Crag Pack, a close friend to the court." Lyra stepped slightly forward, a subtle movement of protection. "Lady Elara is a guest of the king," she said, her tone respectful but firm. "A guest," Seraphine echoed, a smile playing on her lips that didn't reach her cold eyes. "How quaint, we don't often have mute guests. Tell me, child, how does one entertain a king without a voice?" The question was a blade wrapped in silk. I met her gaze, refusing to look down. I let her scent wash over me, the ambition, the jealousy. Ah, there it was, a green, sickly thread, the calculated charm. She saw me as a threat, a rival for the king's attention. The realization was so absurd it almost made me laugh if I could. I simply stared, letting her see that her barbs found no purchase in my silence. My lack of reaction seemed to irritate her. The vinegar scent spiked. "Well, I suppose some prefer a decorative pet. Do try not to shed on the tapestries." With a last, dismissive sniff, she swept past us, her perfume leaving a bitter trail. Lyra let out a soft breath once she was gone. "Pay her no mind, my lady. Her pack seeks a closer alliance and she fancies herself a future queen. Your presence complicates her ambitions." I understood. I was a variable in the court's political equations, a silent, smelling variable. That evening, the summons finally came. Not to the Starfall Gallery, but to the king's private study. It was a room of warm wood and towering bookshelves, smelling of leather, ink, and the comforting, constant scent of Kaelen himself. He was seated behind a large desk, a map spread before him, but he rose as I entered. "Elara, I hope you are settling in," he said, gesturing for me to sit in a chair across from him. His scent was tired but focused, with an undercurrent of something unresolved. "I apologize for the delay. Realm matters are like tangled knots." I nodded, taking the seat. Lyra had taught me a few basic signs for yes, no, thank you, and I understand. I used the sign for yes now, my movements clumsy but clear. He noticed, and a flicker of approval crossed his face. "Good," he leaned back, steepling his fingers. "Lady Seraphine has already found you, I hear." My surprise must have shown, his lips quirked in a humorless smile. "The walls of the citadel have ears, but the air has sense, and nothing happens here I do not eventually learn of." Her interest confirms what I suspected. "You are not seen as just an Omega here. You are seen as mine, and that makes you a target." The word mine sent an unexpected jolt through me. He didn't mean it as possession, I told myself. He meant it as protection, as affiliation, but it still resonated with a strange power. "It is time for your first lesson," he said, his tone shifting to that of a teacher. "Your gift is profound, but it is raw, uncontrolled. In Frostfang, it was a source of pain because you were drowning in the toxicity of others without the means to filter it. Here, you must learn to control it, to focus it. To use it as a tool, not merely endure it as an affliction." He stood and walked to the window, looking out over his sleeping city. "I want you to describe the scent of this room to me, not the obvious scents, leather, ink, wood. Describe the emotional scent." "What do you smell from me right now?" I was stunned. No one had ever asked me to articulate this secret knowledge. It was like asking a bird to describe flight. I closed my eyes, shutting out the visual distraction. I breathed in deeply, focusing past the familiar cedar and storm base of him. I sorted through the layers. The tiredness was there, a dusty, dry scent. The focus was a sharp, clean line like mint, but underneath there was a new note, a tension. The scent of a looming problem, like the metallic tang in the air before a thunderstorm, and woven through it all, a thread of determination, a scent of unyielding granite. I opened my eyes. I had no words, but I had to try. I pointed to him, then touched my temple to indicate thinking the focus, mimed sleeping the tiredness, and then clenched my fist and set my jaw, pointing at the window, at the world beyond, the determination and the looming problem. He watched my pantomime intently, his golden eyes missing nothing. After a moment he gave a slow, approving nod. Accurate, the northern border packs are restless. Ronan and Cedric are whispering poison against my tyranny for taking you. They call it an overreach of royal power. It is a small spark, but sparks can start wildfires. He turned to me. This is how your gift serves, not just to know that Seraphine is jealous, but to sense the true tensions in a room, the hidden alliances, the silent fears. You can smell treason before it is spoken. You can smell loyalty that is true. He returned to his desk, his expression grave. The lesson is this: do not let the scents overwhelm you. Learn to isolate them, to name them. When you feel bombarded, focus on one scent at a time. Trace it to its source. Understand its nature. Your silence is your strength here. It allows you to observe, to listen with your nose without the distraction of having to reply. It was a lifeline, a methodology for the chaos that had been my life. For the first time, my gift felt like something that could be mastered, not just survived. We will practice, he said. Tomorrow you will accompany me to a public audience. Do not engage, simply sit and listen. And after you will tell me, in your way, what you smelled in the hearts of those who came before me. It was a test, a terrifying, exhilarating test. I felt a flutter of the old fear, but over it, a new sensation, purpose. I nodded, my signing more confident this time. I understand. As I left his study, the king's final words followed me. Remember, Elara, in this citadel of whispers, you are the one who can smell the truth beneath them all. Do not fear the gift, learn to wield it. Your legacy and perhaps the peace of this realm may depend on it. The silent song within me hummed louder, tuning itself to a new, purposeful frequency. I was no longer a prisoner of my senses. I was to become their master. The great hall of the Silverwood Citadel was a cavern of power and pageantry. I sat on a small, carved stool slightly behind and to the right of King Kaelen's throne, a place of clear significance that drew every eye. The weight of those stairs was a physical pressure, but I clung to last night's lesson. Do not be overwhelmed. Isolate, observe. The first petitioner approached, a grizzled pack elder from a southern territory complaining of disputed hunting grounds. His scent was a straightforward mix of genuine grievance and a weary, dusty pride. I sorted it, labeled it, honest discontent. I gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod toward Kaelen's back. He didn't turn, but I saw the line of his shoulders relax a fraction. He granted a royal mediator, and the man's scent bloomed with the sharp green relief of sage. The second was a merchant, his words oily with praise for the king's wisdom. But his scent, it was the cloying, rotten sweet stench of deceit, layered over a sharp, greedy pepper, hidden motive. Financial trickery. I felt a cold ripple of anger, not mine, but emanating from the king. He denied the merchant's request for exclusive trade rights with a tone that turned the air to ice. The man retreated, his deceit scent soured by the vinegar of fear. Then came a contingent from a central pack. Their leader spoke of loyalty, but the scent he projected was off, a forced pine aroma like air freshener over something decayed. I focused deeper, past the top note. There, beneath it all, a cold, slithering scent of anticipation. And a faint, familiar rot, Cedric's scent. They were Frostfang allies. They weren't here to pledge loyalty, they were here to probe, to sniff out weakness on Cedric's behalf. My blood ran cold, I had to warn him. As the leader droned on, I let out a small, deliberate breath, a sharp exhale. Kaelen's head tilted a degree. I carefully, under the cover of my folded hands, pointed 2 fingers towards the petitioners and then subtly drew them across my own throat, the sign Lyra had shown me for poison. The king's hand, resting on the arm of his throne, tightened. He cut the leader off mid-sentence. Your words are fair, he said, his voice dangerously quiet, but the scent of Frostfang's discontent clings to your delegation. Tell Cedric his envoys are not welcome while he questions my law." The hall erupted in gasps. The petitioners paled, their forced pine scent evaporating to reveal the pure, sour milk of panic. They were ushered out. After the audience, back in his study, Kaelen turned to me. The merchant's deceit was obvious, but the Frostfang allies, their masking was skilled. You smelled the truth beneath. I nodded, signing Cedric's rot. "Hidden. You passed your first test, Elara," he said, and the granite determination in his scent was now edged with a warmth like sun on stone. "You are not just a guest in this citadel, you have become its secret sentinel." The realization was a bolt of lightning. My prison had become my post, my curse, my weapon, and for the first time I felt not like a defect but like I belonged precisely where I was. In the days that followed, a fragile routine took shape. Mornings were for lessons with Lyra, learning signs, citadel history, the complex web of pack politics. Afternoons, I walked the high-walled castle gardens, practicing Kaelen's teaching. I would focus on a single rose, isolating its scent from the soil, the herbs, the distant forge. I was learning to control the flood, to direct the stream of my gift. It was in the garden that I found the plot. I was near the old moonwell, a secluded spot shaded by silver birches, focusing on the scent of the crystal-clear water, a scent of pure, cold clarity. Then a new scent intruded. It was the sharp, coppery tang of secreted rage, and under it the oily slick of a planned betrayal. It was so potent it cut through my focus like a knife. I froze, becoming a statue among the ferns. The voices came next, hushed and furious. "Not just an Omega, the king listens to her, she's a weapon in his hand." It was a male voice, rough and unfamiliar. "She's a liability. While she breathes, our allies' claim is weakened, and the king's authority over the packs grows." This voice was chillingly familiar, Lady Seraphine. Her usual floral perfume was absent, leaving the raw vinegar of her ambition exposed. The accident must happen before the summit. It will throw him into disarray, make him appear vulnerable, unstable for harboring a weakling. My heart hammered against my ribs. They were talking about me. "An accident. The southern cliff path when she takes her walk tomorrow," the man grunted. "A loose stone, a tragic fall, simple." "See it done," Seraphine hissed, "and ensure the trail leads back to Frostfang sympathizers. Let Cedric's foolish rebellion take the blame." Their footsteps receded. The sense of rage and betrayal faded, leaving only the chilling, metallic afterscent of murder. I slumped against the cold stone of the well, trembling. This was not Frostfang's blunt cruelty. This was the polished, poisonous politics of the royal court. My gift had saved me from a chain. Now it had just saved me from a cliff. I couldn't sign this. It was too complex, too urgent. I had to find Kaelen. Now, I ran through the corridors, ignoring the curious glances. I found him in the strategy room with Rydian and Gavriel discussing border patrols. I burst in, my chest heaving, my face undoubtedly pale with terror. All conversations stopped. Kaelen was at my side in 2 strides. "Elara, what is it?" I grabbed his arm, my fingers desperate. I pointed violently toward the garden, then mimicked Seraphine's graceful, haughty walk. I made a cutting motion at my throat, then pointed to myself. I pantomimed someone pushing a fall and then pointed south toward the cliffs. His golden eyes turned to ice. He understood immediately. The scent around him shifted from concern to a deadly, quiet fury that made the very air crackle. "Rydian, secure the southern cliff path, detain anyone near it." "Gavriel, bring Lady Seraphine to the ivory chamber. Now, and find her recent companion, a rough-scented male, likely a guardsman in someone's pay." As his guards rushed to obey, Kaelen looked down at me, his hand covering mine where it still clutched his arm. His touch was firm, steadying. "You are safe," he said, each word a vow. "Your gift has once again illuminated a darkness that sought to hide." The protective, stormy scent around him intensified, wrapping me in a shield of absolute security. "It seems your first lesson in court politics is also your last." We move from defense to justice. The ivory chamber was a place of stark, beautiful justice. Its walls were bare white marble, and it held only 2 chairs, one for the king and one for the accused. I stood beside Kaelen's chair, my role no longer that of a hidden sentinel but a revealed witness. Lady Seraphine was brought in. Her golden beauty was stark against the white room, but her scent was a frantic, sour mess of fear and crumbling arrogance. She saw me and her eyes flashed with pure hatred before she schooled her features into bewildered innocence. "My king," she began, her voice a trembling melody, "I am confused and distressed by this summons. What is the meaning?" Silence. Kaelen's voice was not loud, but it held the finality of a tomb ceiling shut. He didn't sit, he stood, a pillar of terrible authority. "A plot against a protected guest of the crown was uncovered today in my gardens, a plot to stage an accident. The conspirator has been captured and has confessed to acting on the promise of reward and promotion from a high-ranking courtier." Seraphine's scent spiked with the acrid stench of panic. "A lie, a foul attempt to slander me. By whom? This creature." She flung a hand toward me, her composure shattering. Kaelen didn't even look at her gesture. His gaze was fixed on her, seeing through the performance to the rotten core. "She has no voice to lie with, Seraphine, only the truth she perceives, and she perceived your rage. Your plot, she smelled the betrayal on you before a single word was spoken against her. The concept was alien to Seraphine, a truth sniffer. It sounded like madness, but the king's absolute belief in it was undeniable. Her defenses scrambled. You would take the word of a mute Omega over a highborn Alpha, over the alliance with my pack. I take the truth over politics," Kaelen stated. "And the truth is you sought to murder an innocent to advance your own standing and frame a rival. You have broken the sacred trust of the court and the most basic law of our kind, to protect those under the king's shield." He finally moved, walking to stand before her. "Your pack's alliance is forfeit. You are exiled from the Silverwood Citadel and all territories under my protection. You will be returned to Howling Crag in disgrace, and your Alpha will be informed of your crimes. If you or any from your pack set foot in my realm again, it will be considered an act of war." It was a sentence worse than death for someone like her. Exile, disgrace, the loss of all influence and dreams. She crumpled, the vinegar scent of her ambition evaporating, leaving only the hollow, ashen scent of utter ruin. She was led away, sobbing, her golden beauty now just a gilded mask over broken pottery. When the chamber was empty, Kaelen let out a long breath. The deadly fury was gone, replaced by a weary resolve. He turned to me. "You see now the cost of truth in a world of lies," he said. "It makes you a target, but it also makes you invaluable. Seraphine's plot was not just against you. It was against the stability of this realm. By uncovering it, you have protected both." I signed, my hands now steadier. "Thank you for believing." He placed a hand on my shoulder, a weight both grounding and empowering. "I do not just believe you, Elara. I trust your gift as I trust my own eyes, more in some ways, for eyes can be deceived." He looked toward the door where Seraphine had been taken. "The summit with the border alphas, including Ronan and Cedric, is in 3 days. They will have heard of this. They will know you are not a passive prize, but an active power. Be ready. The silence is about to break." The Citadel prepared for the border summit with a tense energy. The air itself seemed to crackle with anticipation, thick with the sense of polish, forge smoke, and the nervous sweat of stewards. For me, the approaching storm had a distinct, familiar odor, the rotten sweet perfume of Cedric's ambition, now laced with the coppery tang of rage from his recent humiliation. He was coming here, to the heart of the power that had shamed him and stolen his property. Kaelen was different in the days leading up to the summit. The weary resolve had hardened into a focused, strategic calm. His scent was of sharpened steel and still water, deep, powerful, and waiting. He included me in his preparations. In his study, he would lay out the political landscape. Ronan is a coward led by the nose by his son's venom, Kaelen explained, pointing to markers on a map representing the border packs. Cedric's ambition is a disease and he seeks to spread it, using your abduction as proof of my overreach. They will demand your return. Not because they want you, but because the symbol of your defiance must be crushed to validate their own power. He looked at me, his gaze intense. You will be at the summit, you will sit where they can see you. You will not react, no matter what they say. Your presence alone is our first rebuttal, your calm is our second, and your gift, he added, his voice dropping, will be our secret weapon. I need you to listen, Elara, not to their words but to their hearts. Who wavers? Who is truly loyal to them? Who smells of secret fear or hidden doubt? This information is more valuable than an army. The responsibility was a mantle heavier than any iron collar. I was to be the unmoving eye at the center of the hurricane, the silent judge of their integrity. I practiced my focus until my head ached, learning to project a shell of serene blankness while my senses reached out like delicate, invisible threads. The day of the summit arrived. The great hall was arranged not for petitioners, but for a council of wolves. A semicircle of tables for the border alphas faced the dais where Kaelen's throne sat. My stool was placed just below and to the side of the dais, visible to all but positioned clearly under the king's shadow and protection. They entered in a pack, the border alphas. There was gruff Borin of the stone tooth, whose scent was of honest flint and stubborn earth. Liana of the Mistuad, her scent a complex weave of cautious mist and hidden, thorny wisdom, and then Ronan and Cedric of Frostfang. Ronan looked older, diminished. His scent was a muddle of shame, fear, and lingering damp fur. He avoided looking at me entirely. But Cedric's eyes found me immediately. Hatred, hot and poisonous, radiated from him. His rotten sweet scent was so potent it threatened to choke my practiced calm. He smiled, a thin, cruel stretching of lips that didn't touch his eyes. It was the smile of a wolf who sees a chained rabbit, forgetting the chain was already broken. The formalities were a tense pantomime, then Cedric stood as planned. King Kaelen, he began, his voice slick with false respect. We come today with heavy hearts. A fracture has been driven into the ancient trust between the crown and its packs. You entered our territory, disrupted a sacred ceremony, and forcibly took a member of our pack, an Omega, under our protection and care, without cause or compensation. The audacity stole the air from the room. Care. Protection, the words hung obscene in the silent hall. Kaelen didn't move. Continue. Encouraged, Cedric spread his hands. We seek only to heal this fracture. Return the Omega, Elara, to her rightful pack. Let Frostfang handle its own internal matters. This will show the realm that the king respects the autonomy of his alphas and peace will be restored. It was a masterful political play. Frame the theft as a matter of law and precedent, appealing to the other alphas' fear of royal overreach. I felt the shift in the room. Borin's flint scent sharpened with consideration. Liana's mist thickened with wariness. Kaelen leaned forward. You speak of her as a possession, a matter to be handled. You speak of a ceremony where she stood chained in iron, a ceremony celebrating your heirship while you shackled a soul whose only crime was her existence. The law of the sovereign pack forbids cold iron except for treason. What was her treason, Cedric? Cedric's smile didn't waver, but a flicker of rage sparked in his eyes. Her weakness was a drain on the pack's strength. The chain was for her safety, a harsh mercy perhaps, but necessary. We are not all blessed with the Citadel's luxuries to coddle the defective. The insult was deliberate, meant to provoke. Kaelen remained ice. I did not see weakness. I saw a wolf enduring what would break others. I did not see a defect. I saw a gift that your ignorance mistook for a curse. He paused, letting the word gift hang in the air. The other alphas shifted, curious. But you are right, this is about law. The law I invoked was the higher law of protection. She is under my shield now that is immutable. Cedric's control finally cracked. You break our traditions for a mute nothing, he snarled, the facade crumbling. You insult my father, you insult our pack, and you invite chaos. Is this how the Silverwood King rules? By stealing the lowest of our kind on a whim, the hall held its breath. This was the moment. I closed my eyes for a second, shutting out the visual drama. I breathed in, focusing past Cedric's overwhelming poison. I sorted the scents of the other alphas. Borin, the flint was still there, but now mixed with the scent of unsettled dust. He was doubting Cedric's hysterics. Liana, the mist held, but beneath it, a clear, cool stream of water. She was listening, analyzing, not swayed by emotion. Ronan, the shame had spiked into a sour, stomach-turning fear. He was terrified of his own son, and then I found it, among Cedric's own retinue, a younger warrior. His scent was of frostfang pine, but under it a thin, silver thread of remorse and anxiety. He believed Cedric was wrong. He was afraid of the path they were on. I opened my eyes. Kaelen was watching me, waiting. I gave the slightest nod, then my gaze flickered, just for an instant, to the young warrior in Cedric's guard whose head was bowed, his knuckles white on his spear. Kaelen's eyes followed my glance, then returned to Cedric. His demeanor changed. The defensive ice melted into something more commanding, more pitying. You speak of chaos, Cedric, Kaelen said, his voice ringing with a newfound, devastating certainty. But the only chaos I see is the rot you cultivate in your own heart. You surround yourself with those who fear you, not follow you. You see strength in chains and call mercy a whim. The Omega you called nothing has more honor and worth in her silence than you have in all your shouted lies. He stood, his presence expanding to fill the hall. The summit is concluded. Frostfang's grievance is noted and dismissed. Elara remains under my protection, by her worth and by my law. Any pack that moves against this decree moves against the crown itself. He turned to leave, the finality absolute. As he passed my stool, he paused and did something that shocked the room more than any decree. He extended his hand to me, not as a king to a subject, but as an equal offering support to rise. Every eye watched. Cedric's face was a mask of apoplectic fury. Ronan looked sick. The other alphas stared in stunned silence. I placed my hand in Kaelen's. His grip was warm and firm, a silent communication of solidarity. Together we walked from the great hall, leaving a silent tempest of defeated ambition and rewritten loyalties in our wake. The first battle of the summit was over, and we had won not with swords but with truth and an unbreakable, silent alliance. The victory in the great hall was a public one, but the private war continued. Cedric's defeat had not broken him, it had distilled his poison into a purer, more dangerous form. I could smell it lingering at the edges of the citadel like a foul-weather front, even after the border alphas had departed. The young, remorseful guard from his retinue, however, had not left. He had stayed behind, surrendering himself to Kaelen's guards seeking asylum. His name was Fenris. Kaelen summoned me to the smaller, more secure war room to witness Fenris's debriefing. The young warrior knelt, his scent a storm of pine, fear, and that clear silver thread of shame. "Speak," Kaelen commanded, not unkindly. "My king," Fenris began, voice trembling, "I can no longer follow Cedric's path. It leads to ruin. He doesn't just want the Omega back. He wants to undermine you, to rally the discontented packs by painting you as a tyrant. He speaks of an artifact, something hidden in the Frostfang territory. He says it's the key to proving his legitimacy and your folly." My senses sharpened. An artifact. Kaelen's scent didn't change, but I caught the faintest ripple of intense interest, like a stone dropped in the still water of his calm. "What artifact?" Kaelen asked. "I don't know, my king. He calls it the heart of the first Omega. He says it's been lost for generations, but his scouts have found records in the old chieftain's barrow. He believes it holds power. Power that belongs to the true alphas of the north, not a southern king. He plans to retrieve it before the next moon and present it at a gathering of the packs to prove his destiny, the heart of the first Omega. The name resonated in my chest with a deep subsonic hum. It felt familiar, not in memory but in the very essence of my gift, as if the words were a key scraping against a long-lost lock inside me. Kaelen dismissed Fenris to the care of the guards, promising him protection. When we were alone, he turned to me. His storm and cedar scent was now charged with a new energy, the scent of a hunter on a fresh trail. "The first Omega," he murmured, walking to a shelf of ancient, leather-bound texts. "It is an old legend, almost a fairy tale. It is said that before there were alphas and betas and omegas as we know them, there was the first pack. Its heart was not an alpha but an omega of profound connection, a weaver of bonds, a perceiver of truths, a bridge between all wolves. Her legacy was a talisman lost to time." He pulled a heavy tome and began to leaf through it. "If Cedric is searching for it, and if it is real, he didn't need to finish. If it was real and Cedric claimed it, he would wield it as a symbol of divine right, a relic to counter the king's legal authority. It could sway the superstitious and the discontented." I stepped forward, tapping my chest, then my nose. I am connected." I pointed vigorously toward the north, toward Frostfang. Kaelen looked from the book to me, his golden eyes blazing with sudden, electrifying understanding. "Your gift, your profound sense of smell. The way you perceive truths, Elara. What if your defect is not a random mutation? What if it is an echo, a bloodline memory of that first Omega's power?" The world tilted. My whole life, my suffering, my strangeness, could it be a legacy, not a curse? A broken inheritance from a mythic past, the silent song in my soul swelled to a deafening chorus. "Cedric seeks a dead object," Kaelen said, his voice filled with awe and fierce resolve. "But the true legacy isn't a stone or a jewel, it's you, a living, breathing soul smeller. If he finds that artifact, he will use it to bury the truth. We cannot allow that." He closed the book with a decisive thud. "We must find it first, but we do not have scouts in Frostfang territory. We do not know the barrow." He looked at me, a challenge and a plea in his eyes. "You know the land, you spent your life there, and your gift, you can smell magic, can't you? You smelled the intent in Seraphine's plot. Could you smell an ancient power buried in the earth?" I thought of the cellar, of the countless hours focusing on scents to escape my pain. I had known every root that breached the stone, every seasonal shift in the soil's aroma. I had smelled the deep, cold minerals of the bedrock. Could I distinguish an ancient, magical artifact from that? I didn't know, but the hum in my chest said yes. I nodded, my expression grimly determined. A plan, dangerous and desperate, formed in the space between us. We would go to Frostfang. Not with an army, which would be an act of war, but secretly. A small, swift party. Kaelen, myself, Rydian, and Gavriel. We would infiltrate, use my knowledge and my senses to find the barrow and the artifact before Cedric did. "It is a risk," Kaelen said, his scent finally betraying a hint of personal fear, not for himself, but for me. "Returning you to that place," I reached out impulsively and placed my hand over his where it rested on the book. The contact sent a jolt through both of us. His scent flared with protective fierceness. I looked into his eyes and slowly, surely nodded again. "It is my legacy, my fight." He turned his hand, clasping mine for a brief, solid moment. "Then we reclaim it," he vowed, "not for power, but for truth. We will show the packs that the heart of the first Omega isn't a thing to be wielded, it is a truth to be lived, and it stands beside the king." The journey into my past, into the heart of the danger, was set. We were no longer just defending, we were advancing. The silent song had found its purpose, and it was calling me home. Traveling under the cloak of a new moon, we were shadows among shadows. Kaelen, Rydian, Gavriel, and I moved with a silence born of urgency and skill. I was wrapped in dark, travel-worn clothes, my face half hidden by a hood, but nothing could mask the tumult inside me as we crossed the familiar scent line into Frostfang territory. Every pine, every rocky outcrop was a memory etched in pain. The air, once a suffocating blanket of malice, now smelled different, sharper. The rot was still there, but it was concentrated around the main lodge, a festering core. The rest of the territory smelled of neglect and fear. I led them not by sight, but by the map in my nose, avoiding the hunters' paths, skirting the sentry points whose routines I knew from a lifetime of observing from the shadows. Kaelen walked beside me, his presence a constant, steadying storm. He didn't speak. He trusted my lead completely. That trust was a warm stone in my stomach, fighting the chill of old terror. We reached the edge of the old burial grounds as dawn threatened to blush the eastern sky. The chieftain's barrow was a large, moss-covered mound at the head of the valley, overlooked by a ring of standing stones. It was forbidden ground, feared by the pack. As a child, I'd been told monsters slept here. Now I knew the monster had been in the lodge all along. We crouched in the tree line. The barrow entrance, a dark slit in the hillside, was unguarded. Cedric was arrogant. He likely believed no one would dare steal from his prize before he arrived to claim it with ceremony. "This is it," Kaelen breathed. Rydy and Gavriel watched the perimeter. "Give the signal at any sign of approach." The two guards melted into the trees. Kaelen looked at me. Ready, I was, but I nodded. Together we slipped from the trees and into the mouth of the barrow. Inside, the world changed. The outside sense vanished, replaced by the overwhelming smells of age, damp earth, crumbling stone, and the profound, dusty silence of centuries. Our footsteps echoed in the narrow passageway. Kaelen lit a small, shielded lantern, casting jumping shadows on walls carved with faded runes, wolves, moons, stars. My gift, which had been a wide net outside, now focused into a laser point. I breathed deeply, sorting through the strata of scent, rat droppings, fungus, water seepage, and then something else, a scent so faint it was more a memory of a scent. Like the echo of a song after the music has stopped. It was sweet and clean, like sunlight on morning dew, but with a depth of sorrow and power that made my eyes water. There, I grabbed Kaelen's arm and pointed down a side passage he was about to pass. The scent was stronger that way. He followed without question. The passage opened into a circular chamber. In the center, on a stone plinth, lay a simple, unadorned wooden box. It was old, the wood gone gray with time, but unrotted. The beautiful, sorrowful scent emanated from it. This was it, the heart, but the chamber was not empty. Cedric stood before the plinth, his back to us, a torch in his hand. He was alone. He had come early, greedy, and impatient. "Finally," he whispered to the box, his voice filled with rapturous triumph. "The key to my crown, with you they will all see, they will kneel." He reached for the lid. "Cedric." Kaelen's voice filled the chamber, not with a shout, but with the absolute authority of stone and sky. Cedric whirled, his torchlight painting his face in grotesque strokes of rage and shock. His eyes flew from Kaelen to me, standing just behind him. The rotten sweet scent of his ambition curdled into the acrid stench of pure, incandescent hate. "You," he spat, "you dare. You bring the defect to defile this sacred place. The only defilement here is your presence," Kaelen said, stepping forward, placing himself between Cedric and me. "This does not belong to you. It belongs to Frostfang." Cedric shrieked, his composure shattered, "to its true alpha. Not to a southern thief and his pet monster." He drew a long, cruel-looking dagger from his belt. "I should have slit your throat in that cellar." The threat, the visual of him holding a blade in the place of my oldest nightmares, triggered something in me. Not fear, a cold, clear fury. I stepped out from behind Kaelen. I met Cedric's hate-filled gaze and I let him see it. I let him see the decades of pain, the silent screams, the withheld tears. I let him see that the monster he feared was his own reflection. And I let my gift loose, not to analyze but to project. I focused every ounce of the truth I had smelled on him, his petty fears, his hollow ambition, the rot at his core, and I pushed that scent back at him, amplified, undeniable. Cedric's eyes widened. He stumbled back a step as if struck. He could smell it. For the first time, he was drowning in the foul truth of himself. Which, he gasped, his voice strangled. "What are you doing?" "Showing you your heart," Kaelen said, his voice grim. "It is as empty as your claims." With a roar of denial, Cedric lunged, not at Kaelen, but at me, his dagger aimed for my chest. Time slowed. Kaelen moved, a blur of motion. There was a clash, a grunt, and the metallic scent of blood filled the air. Cedric lay on the stone floor, disarmed, Kaelen's boot pinning his wrist. A shallow cut bled on Kaelen's forearm where he'd blocked the strike. The scent of Cedric's rage evaporated, leaving only the sour, pathetic smell of a defeated bully. Kaelen looked at the blood on his arm, then at Cedric. "That is the only blood that will be spilled for this legacy," he stated. "You are not worth a war. You will be taken back to the Citadel to answer for your crimes, conspiracy, attempted murder of a royal ward. Your reign of poison is over." Rydian and Gavriel appeared at the entrance, having heard the commotion. They hauled a broken, sputtering Cedric to his feet. Kaelen turned to the wooden box. He didn't seize it. He approached with a reverence I had never seen in him. He looked at me. "This is your history, Elara. You should be the one." My hands trembled as I stepped forward. The beautiful, sorrowful scent was almost overwhelming now. I placed my hands on the cool, ancient wood. There was no lock. With a gentle push, the lid swung open. Inside, nestled on a bed of long-dried moss, was not a jewel or a stone. It was a simple, woven circlet of silver birch and wolfsbane, both dried but preserved by time and magic. And resting in the center of the weave was a single, perfect pearl that seemed to hold a captured moonlight. It was humble, it was beautiful, it smelled of peace, of connection, of profound, gentle strength. Tears, silent as ever, streamed down my face. This was no weapon. It was a reminder, a symbol of what an Omega's true strength could be. Kaelen breathed out a sigh that was pure awe. "The heart of the first Omega," he whispered, "a crown not of dominion but of unity." I reached into the box and with a reverence that came from my very soul, lifted the circlet. It was light as a breath. I did not put it on. I held it, feeling its truth resonate with the silent song inside me. We had found it. Not for power, but for proof. The legacy was real, and I was its living heir. We emerged from the barrow into the gray light of dawn, the scent of pine and free air a shocking relief after the tomb's heavy stillness. In my hands, cradled like a sleeping bird, was the birch-and pearl circlet. Its gentle, sorrowful power scent was a quiet constant against the adrenaline still buzzing in my veins. Ahead, Rydian and Gavriel marched a bound and sullen Cedric, his rotten sweetness now muted into the stale odor of defeat. Kaelen walked beside me, his cut forearm hastily bound with a strip of cloth. The scent of his blood, a clean, metallic, powerful scent, mixed with his usual cedar and storm, creating an aroma of fierce, protective victory. He glanced at the circlet in my hands, then at my face. "A crown that asks for wisdom, not obedience," he said, his voice low. "It changes everything, Elara, but its meaning will be dictated by how it is presented." I understood. If we marched back and presented it as a conquered treasure, it became a spoil of war, feeding Cedric's narrative of theft. It had to be a revelation, not a seizure. As we navigated the hidden paths back towards the Citadel territory, a new plan formed between us without words. We would not sneak in, we would send riders ahead. We would call a gathering of the packs, not a tense summit, but a formal convocation. And there, before all, the truth of the first Omega's legacy would be unveiled, alongside the crimes of the one who sought to hoard its power. The days of preparation at the Citadel were a whirlwind. Lyra helped me prepare a simple, dignified gown of pale gray, the color of dawn and wisdom. I spent hours in the Starfall Gallery, holding the circlet, trying to understand its silent song. It didn't speak to me in words or even specific sense. It simply resonated. It made the silent song inside me feel louder, clearer, more anchored. It felt less like an artifact and more like a companion. Kaelen was everywhere, a force of organized purpose. His scent was of focused energy, of a sculptor nearing the final strokes on a masterpiece. He met with his advisors, sent out the summons, and ensured the security of the citadel would be impeccable. The scent of Lady Seraphine's betrayal had made him wary but not paranoid. This would be an open, honest court. The day of the gathering arrived. The great field outside the citadel walls was thronged with wolves from dozens of packs. Banners fluttered in the breeze, a riot of colors against the green. The air was a complex soup of curiosity, skepticism, anticipation, and for some, like Borin of Stone Tooth and Lyanna of Mistuad who had returned, a wary hope. A high platform had been erected. King Kaelen stood at its center. To one side, under guard, stood Cedric and a defeated, broken-looking Alpha Ronin, and on the king's other side stood me. The crowd's murmuring was a living thing. I could smell their collective breath, their emotions mixing into a potent cloud. I closed my eyes briefly, finding my center, focusing on the gentle weight of the circlet I held on a cushion of dark velvet. Kaelen raised his hands and silence fell. Wolves of the realms, his voice carried effortlessly over the field. You were summoned to a summit of discord. I summon you now to a gathering of truth. You have heard lies, that I am a tyrant, that I steal pack members on a whim, that I break our ancient laws. He paused, his golden gaze sweeping the crowd. The first truth, the law broken, was not mine. It was Frostfang's who bound one of their own in cold iron. He gestured to Cedric. The second truth, the whim, was an act of protection, for the one they chained possesses a gift our world has not seen for ages, the gift of the soul smeller, one who perceives the essence of truth itself. A ripple of astonished whispers. The concept was foreign, mystical. And the third truth, Kaelen continued, his voice dropping into a more intimate, powerful register, concerns what was sought in shadows to justify more lies. He turned to me and gave a solemn nod. This was my moment. My throat was dry, but my hands were steady. I lifted the velvet cushion and stepped forward to the very edge of the platform, turning slowly so all could see. The ancient circlet, humble yet luminous, caught the sunlight. A collective gasp went up. Many didn't know what they were looking at, but they felt its power, not a dominating force, but a compelling, peaceful presence. Kaelen spoke again. This is what Cedric of Frostfang sought to unearth and wield as a weapon. He called it the heart of the first Omega, a key to power. He is both right and profoundly wrong. He walked to stand beside me, his presence a solid pillar next to my trembling form. It is the heart, but it is not a key to dominion. Look at it, it is woven of birch, the tree of new beginnings, and wolfsbane, the herb of protection. Its jewel is a pearl, formed from a lifetime of patience and gentle strength. This is not a crown for an alpha's brow. It is a symbol of the Omega's true legacy, connection, perception, the gentle strength that binds a pack together, that hears its heart. He pointed to Cedric. He saw a tool for control, because that is all his heart can comprehend. Then he gestured to me. She whom he called Nothing held it and understood its true purpose, for she lives that legacy. Her silence speaks the truth her gift reveals. Her endurance is the strength this circlet represents. The field was utterly silent, captivated. I could smell the shift. The skepticism was melting into awe, the curiosity into respect. Borin's flinty scent had softened with understanding. Lyanna's mist had cleared, revealing the clear water of acceptance. Kaelen faced the crowd fully. So here is the final truth I offer you today. The law is restored, the legacy is protected. Not by a king's decree alone, but by the living proof of it. He turned to me, and in his eyes I saw not just a king protecting a subject, but a partner acknowledging an equal. The crown of unity does not belong on a throne. It belongs to the spirit of every pack, and it has found its guardian. He took the cushion from me and held it aloft for all to see one last time. Then he did something that would be sung about for generations. He did not place it on his own head, he did not place it on mine. Instead, he knelt, the Alpha King knelt, and placed the cushion bearing the circlet on the wooden planks of the platform at my feet. It was a gesture of unparalleled symbolism. The highest power bowing to the deepest truth, he was not submitting to me, he was honoring the legacy I represented. The silence held for one more heartbeat, then from the crowd, Alpha Liana of Mistuad went to one knee, then Borin of Stone Tooth. Then like a wave across the field, the entire gathering, warriors, elders, omegas, alphas, knelt in a rustle of fabric and a sigh of collective breath. Only Cedric and Ronan remained standing, isolated in their shame, surrounded by a sea of respectful silence. The truth had not just been told. It had been seen, felt, and accepted. I looked out over the bowed heads, the scent of their unified respect washing over me like a clean, sun-warmed river. The silent song inside me didn't just hum now, it sang, clear and bright and unafraid. The chain was gone. The crown was understood, and I was free. In the wake of the gathering, the citadel hummed with a new energy. It was the sound of settlement, of integration. The border pacts did not leave immediately. They stayed to talk, to negotiate true treaties now that the poison of Frostfang's ambition had been drawn. The field of tents outside the walls became a temporary city of diplomacy, and I had a new role. King Kaelen named it the voice of the unheard. It was not a title of political power but of moral authority. I was given a seat, a small, carved chair, at the king's council table when matters of pack unity and justice were discussed. My weapon was not a vote but my perception. The first council session was terrifying. Seated around the heavy oak table were Alphas Borin and Liana, Kaelen's senior advisors, and the newly appointed, remorseful Alpha of Frostfang, an older, stern but fair-minded cousin named Jorah who had been recalled from a distant outpost to replace the disgraced Ronan. Jorah's scent was of frozen rivers and durable granite, cold but honest. The topic was the redistribution of Frostfang's hunting lands which Cedric had hoarded, causing hardship for neighboring packs. Proposals were laid out. Borin argued for a straightforward division based on warrior strength. Liana suggested a rotational system based on seasonal game patterns. The advisors debated tax implications and historical claims. The air grew thick with the sense of stubbornness, hidden greed, genuine concern, and political calculation. I sat silently in my chair, my hands folded in my lap, doing the work Kaelen had trained me for. I isolated, analyzed, traced. I listened to Borin's words about strength, but I smelled the underlying scent of old insecurity, a fear of scarcity that made him grasp for more. Liana's plan was clever, but I detected a subtle, thorny pride in its complexity. She wanted to be seen as the wisest. Jorah, the new Frostfang Alpha, sat stiffly, his frozen river scent masking a deep well of shame and a desperate, unspoken need for a gesture of trust from the others. Kaelen listened to all, his eyes occasionally flicking to me. When the debate began to circle, he raised a hand. "Elara," he said, his voice neutral, "what is the heart of this matter, not the words but the fears that fuel them?" All eyes turned to me. The weight of their attention, the pressure of their swirling sense was immense. I took a steadying breath. I pointed to Borin, then mimed eating and looking around worriedly, fear of scarcity. I pointed to Liana, then tapped my forehead and gave a slight, proud tilt of my chin, pride in intellect. Finally, I pointed to Jorah, and I did something simple. I placed my closed fist over my own heart, then opened my hand, palm up, and extended it slightly toward the center of the table. He needs an offer of trust. The reactions were instantaneous. Borin flushed, his flint scent sparking with embarrassed recognition. Liana's lips thinned, her misty scent swirling in slight chagrin. Jorah, however, stared at me, his granite expression softening with something like shocked gratitude. His frozen river scent thawed just a little, revealing the clean water beneath. Kaelen nodded. "So, we do not merely divide land. We address the fear that demands too much, we acknowledge the wisdom without inflating pride, and we build the new Frostfang by extending the trust it has lost. He leaned forward, Jorah. You will cede the eastern meadow to Stone Tooth not as spoils, but as a permanent gesture of goodwill to alleviate their historical scarcity. Boren, you will provide Frostfang with seasoned hunters to teach new techniques in their remaining lands for 2 seasons, a gesture of returned trust. He turned to Lyanna. Your rotational system is adopted for the northern woods, administered by a council you will chair. The complexity will be managed by the wisest among us. The solution was a masterstroke, addressing not just the logistical problem but the emotional wounds beneath it. It came from seeing the whole truth, my truth. As the council ended, Alpha Jorah approached me. He bowed, not as deep as to the king, but with a profound respect. Voice of the unheard, he said, his voice rough. You saw what I dared not say, thank you. His scent was now of thawing granite and resilient moss, a scent of hard-won hope. Later, in the solitude of the Sun Tower, Lyra brushed my hair. They speak of you in the kitchens, my lady, she said softly. They say the king's silent council has a voice louder than a thunderclap, that you bring peace. I looked at my reflection. The girl from the cellar was gone. In her place was a woman with steady eyes who carried a silent song that could calm storms in the hearts of alphas. My legacy was no longer a buried circlet, it was a living practice. I was learning to wield my gift not as a weapon of exposure, but as a tool of healing. The restoration was no longer about me, it was about using my truth to restore balance to the entire realm. Peace, I was learning, was not a static state but a delicate bloom, easily bruised. The gathering had sown unity, and the council fostered understanding, but deep roots of resentment take time to wither. The scent of Frostfang's rot had been cleared from the air, but its residue lingered in dark corners, waiting for a chance to ferment. It began with whispers, a subtle souring in the Citadel's normally clean emotional scent. I'd catch whiffs of it in passing, a servant's sudden, sharp anxiety with no visible cause, a guard's scent spiking with distrust toward a comrade from another pack. At first, I dismissed it as the natural friction of so many packs living in close quarters. But the whispers grew into murmurs, and the murmurs carried a specific, chilling refrain. The king is bewitched. The accusation was never shouted. It was sighed in laundry rooms, muttered in the armory. The story went that the mighty Alpha King, invincible in battle and wise in judgment, had been ensnared by a mute Omega's unnatural magic. That my gift was a form of sorcery, clouding his mind, making him weak, favoring outsiders over his own loyal subjects. It was Cedric's final, poisonous seed, sown before his imprisonment, now finding fertile ground in the fears of the traditionalists and those who felt threatened by the new, unified order. I brought my concerns to Kaelen in our now regular evening meeting in the Starfall Gallery. I pantomimed people whispering, then touched my temple and shook my head, lies, confusion, and finally pointed to him and made a weaving motion with my hands, bewitched. He listened, his expression growing grim. I have heard the rumors, he admitted, the scent of frustration like hot metal around him. They are cowards' weapons, hard to fight because they leave no face to confront. They target you to undermine me. If they can make the packs doubt my judgment, attribute my fair rulings to enchantment rather than wisdom, the unity we've built will crumble. He looked out at the stars, his jaw tight. We must find the source, not just the whisperers but the one coordinating them. This has the scent of a plot, not just idle gossip. The next day, a tangible crisis erupted. Several sheep from the Citadel's flocks were found dead in a pasture, their bodies unmarked by predator teeth but with a strange, frothy substance at their mouths. Panic, sharp and acrid, swept through the lower town, and then the inevitable whisper connected the dots. It's the Omega's doing. Wolfsbane in the crown, she's poisoning the land. the wolf's bane in the woven circlet, the symbol of protection twisted into an accusation of poison. It was clever, vile, and emotionally potent. Fear has a scent all its own, and it now poured through the citadel gates. Kaelen acted swiftly. He had the flocks secured, the dead animals examined by his most trusted healers. He publicly drank from the well that fed the pasture to prove the water was clean. But fear, once ignited, is a difficult fire to extinguish. I walked the halls and felt the change. Where once there was curiosity, now there were averted eyes. Where there was respect, now a flicker of suspicion. The warm, safe scent of the citadel had grown cold and jagged. The silent song within me faltered, hitting a discordant note of isolation. This was a different kind of chain, forged from fear and lies. That night, as I struggled to meditate in my room, a new scent found me. It slithered under my door, the scent of damp stone and hidden places, and beneath it, the cloying, rotten-sweet signature I knew all too well. Cedric, but he was in the dungeons. This was someone who carried his scent like a badge, someone who had been close to him, infected by his ideology. I followed the scent trail, a ghost in my own home. It led me down, away from the living quarters, into the older, storage levels of the citadel near the ancient foundations. The scent grew stronger, mixed with the smell of bitter herbs and brewing. I peered around a corner into a dusty, disused cellar. A figure hunched over a small, bubbling crucible. By the light of a single candle, I recognized him, Torvin, the former beta of Frostfang. He had not been exiled with Cedric, he had sworn new oaths to Jorah, but his scent told the true story. His hatred had not faded, it had festered. He was brewing a poison, a subtle, slow-acting one, I guessed from the complex, noxious aroma, likely meant for the remaining livestock or even the water's supply, to keep the fear alive and blame it on the bewitching Omega. My heart pounded. This was the source, not a shadowy mastermind, but a bitter, broken man keeping his old alpha's vendetta alive. I needed to get Kaelen, but as I turned to go, my foot dislodged a loose stone. The clatter was deafening in the silence. Torvin spun, his eyes wide with shock and then blazing with recognition and fury. "You," he snarled, dropping his stirring rod and drawing a skinning knife. "You ruin everything, you and your cursed nose." He lunged. I was not a warrior. My only defense was my gift. As he closed in, the stink of his rage, his bitterness, his toxic brew flooding my senses, I did the only thing I could. I didn't try to smell his emotions. I focused all my will and pushed the combined, horrific scent of his own concoction, the poison he meant for others, back at him, amplified 100-fold in my mind, a sensory assault of his own vileness. Torvin gagged, stumbling as if he'd run into a wall. He clutched his throat, his eyes watering, retching. The psychological impact of being force-fed the essence of his own malice was overwhelming. He dropped the knife, collapsing to his knees, heaving dry sobs. The commutation brought guards within minutes. They found me standing, trembling but unharmed, over a broken beta weeping in the vapors of his own poisonous plot. The threat was over. The source was revealed. But as I was led back to the light, the cold fear of the citadel still hung in the air. Unraveling a plot was one thing. Healing the distrust it had sown would be another battle entirely. The poison piece had shown me that my greatest challenge would not be facing enemies in the open, but cleansing the invisible toxins they left behind in the hearts of my new pack. Torvin's capture and confession were a swift, brutal surgery. The poison was identified, the remaining stores destroyed. In a public judgment before the citadel, the facts were laid bare. The plot was Cedric's lingering venom, carried out by a loyalist too steeped in hatred to accept the new peace. It was not witchcraft, but simple, bitter malice. The truth was a balm, but the wound of fear remained. You could not unsmell the suspicion that had tainted the air. I walked through the halls and still caught the metallic tang of unease, saw the hesitation in a smile, felt the space people left around me. The voice of the unheard was now heard with a note of caution. I had saved them from a poisoner, but to some I was still the strange, silent source of the upheaval. Kaelen was a tempest contained. His fury at the lingering fear directed at me was a scent of ozone and cracking stone, but he channeled it into action. "We have proven the plot," he said in the solitude of his study, the scent of his frustration mixing with the cedar of the shelves. "But we must heal the fear. Logic does not cure a frightened heart. We must speak to something deeper." He proposed a ceremony of renewal, an ancient ritual not performed in generations. It was a pack-wide cleansing, a symbolic washing away of old grudges and poisonous thoughts. It required the participation of every wolf in the citadel, led by the Alpha, and a unifying symbol of peace. "The crown of unity. You will lead it with me," Kaelen said, his gaze holding mine. "Not as my counsel or a ward or a symbol, as the living heart of what we are renewing." The ritual requires a bearer of the crown to stand in the center, to be the still point around which the cleansing flows. The people must see you not as a source of fear, but as its antidote. The idea terrified me. To be the absolute center of attention, with thousands of eyes on me, their fear and hope and skepticism a tidal wave of scent, it was my deepest nightmare. I shook my head, my hands signing no, cannot, too much. He stepped closer, his storm sense softening with an emotion I couldn't quite name, a gentle, relentless certainty. "Elara, your entire life has been a lesson in enduring the emotions of others. You have been baptized in them. This is not an ordeal. It is a purpose. Use your gift. Do not let the scents wash over you. Guide them. The ritual basin is not just water. It is infused with purifying herbs, sage, lavender, salt. Focus on those scents. Be the anchor of clarity in the storm. Show them what your silence truly holds, not emptiness, but profound strength." His words were a lifeline thrown into my panic. He wasn't asking me to be normal. He was asking me to use my abnormality, my gift, for the pack, to be the soul smeller not as a detector of lies, but as a conduit for cleansing. The day of the ceremony arrived, overcast and heavy with the promise of real rain. The great courtyard was packed, a sea of faces turned toward the central stone basin, large enough for a wolf to bathe in. It was filled with clear water steeping with the cleansing herbs, their clean, sharp scent a bright thread in the anxious air. Kaelen stood by the basin, dressed in simple white. I stood opposite him, also in white, holding the crown of unity on its velvet cushion. My heart was a frantic bird, but I clung to his instructions. Focus on the herbs, sage for wisdom, lavender for calm, salt for preservation. The ritual began with a low, unison chant from the oldest pack members. The sound vibrated in the stone beneath my feet. Then Kaelen spoke, his voice weaving through the chant. "We gather to wash clean what has been soiled, not our bodies, but our bonds. We let flow from us the poison of suspicion, the bile of old hate, the dust of fear." He dipped a silver bowl into the basin and poured the water over his own head in a shimmering cascade. A collective sigh rose from the crowd. Then it was my turn. All eyes were on me. The pressure of their collective emotion, a thick fog of hope, fear, curiosity, residual distrust, threatened to crush me. I closed my eyes, I breathed in. Instead of fighting the tsunami, I sought the anchor. I isolated the clean, green scent of the sage in the water. I followed the floral, soothing trail of lavender. I latched onto the clean, sharp bite of the salt. I focused on them until they were all I could smell, a pure, powerful triad of cleansing. I opened my eyes. The world had not changed, but my perception had. The fog of the crowd's emotion was still there, but it was outside the clear, scented bubble of my focus. I was the still point. I stepped forward. With a reverence that felt both borrowed and innate, I placed the crown of unity gently onto the surface of the water in the great basin. It floated, the pearl glowing dully in the cloudy light. A murmur of awe rippled through the crowd. Then, following Kaelen's silent cue, I dipped the silver bowl. I did not pour it over myself. I turned to the nearest person in the front row, a young guard who had once looked at me with sharp suspicion. His scent was of nervous sweat and brittle pride. I poured the water slowly over his bowed head. He flinched, then looked up, water streaming down his face. Our eyes met, and I smiled. It was a small, tremulous thing, but it was real. In that moment, I pushed not a scent, but a feeling, the clean, calm, focused certainty I held from the herbs. His brittle pride scent melted, replaced by the startled, clean scent of rain on dry earth, shock, then relief. I moved to the next person and the next. A cook, a weaver, a warrior from a rival pack. Each time I poured, I met their eyes and I offered the silent, scented certainty. My gift, always a receiver, became a gentle broadcaster. I wasn't stealing their emotions, I was offering a cleaner alternative. One by one, the metallic fear in the air began to dissolve, washed away by the physical and symbolic water, but more so by the quiet, undeniable authenticity of the act. They weren't just watching a ritual, they were receiving a blessing from the one they had feared. And it held no malice, no demand, only a silent offer of peace. As I finished with the front rows, Kaelen began, and then the elders, passing the bowls, the cleansing becoming a chain. The overcast sky finally broke, and a gentle, warm rain began to fall, mingling with the ritual water as if nature itself approved. I stood back by the basin, the floating crown before me, the rain soaking my white clothes. I looked out at the courtyard, now a scene of laughing, crying, embracing wolves, all washed clean by the same water. The scent in the air was transformed. It was the petrichor after a storm, the profoundly clean, hopeful, unified scent of earth finally quenched. Kaelen came to stand beside me, water dripping from his hair. He didn't speak. He simply looked at me, and his scent was pure, unadulterated pride and something warmer, deeper. Respect had long been there. Now there was a bond forged in the fire of crisis and cooled in this cleansing rain. He placed a hand on my shoulder, a solid, steady weight. The chain was gone, the crown was floating, the fear was washed away. And I, Elara the silent, the soul smeller, stood in the rain, finally home in the hearts of my pack. Time, in the Silverwood Citadel, began to flow like a deep, clear river after the rapids. The cleansing rain ceremony marked a true turning point. The title voice of the Unheard was no longer just a formal role, it became a lived truth. Wolves from all ranks would seek me out, not in the council chamber, but in the sun-dappled gardens or the quiet library nooks. They came with problems that had no clear answer, family disputes, personal shames, quiet griefs that festered because they feared to voice them. I could not give them advice, but I could listen with my whole being. I could smell the unspoken pain behind a father's anger, the hidden love beneath a sibling's rivalry, the terror masked by an elder's stubbornness. And in my silence, by focusing my gift and offering a simple, understanding touch or a written note that cut to the heart of their hidden feeling, I could help them hear themselves. I became a mirror for their truest emotions, reflecting back not judgment but clarity. Kaelen's reign entered a golden age. With the border tensions settled and internal treachery purged, his energy turned to building new trade routes, libraries, healing halls. He consulted me on every major decision, not for prophecy, but for perception. What does the heart of the realm smell like regarding this? He would ask. I became his compass for the collective spirit of his people. Our partnership deepened into a seamless harmony. We communicated in a language of glances, slight gestures, and the shared understanding of sense. In the Starfall Gallery one evening, as we watched the constellations wheel, he spoke quietly. "You have restored more than a legacy, Elara. You have restored a balance we did not know we were missing. The Alpha's strength needs the Omega's perception. The King's law needs the heart's truth. They are two halves of one whole." He turned to me, his golden eyes serious in the starlight. "I would have you rule beside me, not as a queen in title, for titles are just words, but as a sovereign in truth." As my equal partner in guiding this realm, will you? It wasn't a romantic proposal. It was something more profound, a recognition, a completion. It was the Alpha King, the most powerful wolf alive, acknowledging that his strength was incomplete without the truth I carried. The silent song in my soul swelled to a crescendo of perfect, resonant peace. I took his hand, a gesture that had become familiar, grounding. I placed it over my heart so he could feel its steady, sure beat. Then I nodded, yes, always. The official bonding ceremony was unlike any the realms had seen. There were no displays of dominance, no archaic rituals of submission. It was held in the same courtyard that had witnessed the cleansing rain. We stood before the pack, side by side. Kaelen spoke of partnership, of strength tempered by wisdom, of law guided by truth. Then together we lifted the crown of unity from its cushion. We did not place it on either of our heads. Instead, we held it aloft between us, a symbol of the bond we shared and the balance we pledged to uphold for the pack. A new era was christened, the era of the silent song. Years flowed, the citadel thrived. The story of the chained Omega and the king who saw her became legend, a bedtime story told to pups to teach them about hidden worth and true strength. Frostfang, under Jorah's stern but just rule, became a loyal and prosperous territory, its dark past a cautionary tale. I never did find my physical wolf, that form remained locked away, but I discovered I didn't need it. My gift was my shape, my silence my voice, and my pack, my vast, beloved pack, was my territory. Kaelen and I ruled from a place of deep, unspoken understanding. We were two notes in a perfect chord, the strength and the truth, the storm and the scent that foretells it. One autumn evening, as we walked the high battlements looking over the peaceful, glowing town below, Kaelen stopped. The scent around him was one of deep contentment, of cedar and calm earth. He looked at me, his eyes still holding that lightning-strike recognition from the first night he saw me in chains. "Do you ever miss it?" he asked softly. "The silence of not knowing. The peace of being oblivious." I looked out at our realm, at the threads of smoke from peaceful hearths, at the distant howl of a happy pup. I breathed in the complex, beautiful, living scent of it all, the joy, the minor sorrows, the hard work, the enduring love. It was a symphony, and I could hear every note. I turned to him and shook my head, a slow, sure smile on my face. I touched my nose, then my heart, and then spread my hands wide to encompass everything below, everything we had built together. "No," my gesture said, "this is my peace. This is my song, and it is finally perfectly heard."